everyone. Welcome back to another session of Parallel Barkings. My name is Larry Backer, Woof Woof, and I'm here with my puppy.
Ariana Backer, bark bark.
We should switch that. You should do bark and I should do woof. No, you should do woof and I should do bark.
Oh, okay. We can switch it up.
Otherwise, I'd be discriminating against barking by only woofing,
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
right?
Let's
And that
switch
would
it
be
up.
bad. And
Mm-hmm.
that indeed is a really obnoxious and somewhat pitifully lame way of introducing our topic for today.
Also agreed.
Yeah, I know. Which is the movement spearheaded by a number of jurisdictions, but what caught the press media's eye was New York's effort to expand the range of anti-discrimination, the application of anti-discrimination provisions to height and weight. The stories ran from you can't discriminate against fat people and small people to stories about how this is actually a very good thing. So depending on your political perspective, this is viewed as either an eye roll or as a movement towards a greater or more comprehensive legal structuring for social justice, or at least social justice in the legal sphere. And so today we were going to talk about this a little bit. I wanted to mention that even though this New York's efforts has been somewhat more newsworthy than other efforts, they are not alone, and in fact they are sort of coming relatively late to the game. Height and weight discrimination prohibitions have already been adopted by Binghamton, New York, but of course that's a college town. Madison, Wisconsin, another college town, but that's a weird college town. Urbana, Illinois, DC, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, and the state of Michigan, which is not a college town. So there's been some movement for height and weight discrimination, among other things. When you look at the legislation, though, you realize that that height and adding height and weight, and we'll talk about this a little bit, I think, in a second, but I wanted to just lay this out before we talk about it a little bit. Height and weight or prohibitions of discrimination against height and weight actually join a much larger group of characteristics with respect to which a certain social actors in certain categories of activities can no longer use as a basis for discriminating, that is, for making a decision based on this factor. And these include some of the ones everyone is well aware of, but then others that you may not be. Race, color, creed, age, national origin, immigration or citizenship status, gender, sexual orientation, disability, marital status, partnership status, caregiver status, sexual and reproductive health decisions, uniform status, any lawful source of income. I guess it's not a status, but it's a condition. Status as a victim of domestic violence or status as a victim of sex offenses or stalking, whether children are, may be, or would be residing with a person, or discrimination based on conviction or arrest record. That seems to be the universe of discrimination. Not so long ago, the universe was much smaller. Race, national origin, religion, which in New York is creed, by the way, as opposed to the name of a character in a movie.
Yes, thank
Right,
you.
right. So race, color, creed, national origin were the biggies, and then were the traditional baseline, and then to which we've added a number of others, to which we're now adding height and weight restrictions. While everyone first goes to people who are outliers and the source of jokes and the like, with respect to both height and weight. In a sense, it really, it both makes sense, and it raises the same sort of issue you have as you expand the scope of characteristics with respect to which discrimination is unlawful, and that is the way in which you can actually prove that discrimination, the kinds of things you need to do to prove that, but also suggests the way in which our society, because this is a general trend, the way in which our society is now in fairly extraordinary ways, and that's not a criticism, it's more a wonderment, because this is all happening very, very quickly. The way in which society is now expressing the nature of social justice in terms of very specific categories of discrimination, which also suggests the sort of categories of characteristics with respect to which one used to be able to make decisions, that is really changing the way in which, from a macro perspective, social relations, at least in the public arena, are being defined and carried out, and the extent to which all of this is now being monitored, not in the private sphere, but in the public sphere.
Very micro. Well, I'm glad you said that, because when you're sitting here saying all this, I'm wondering, when we're laying out all of these laws, these legislations, how could we possibly capture all of the discriminatory possibilities, like, that could ever exist out there?
No, and that's an excellent point, and that goes, and this, this is of course a problem when intellectuals then become either bureaucrats or start whispering into the ear of either elected officials or bureaucrats. They as Mao said, there's nothing more, there's nothing clumsier than a group of people. They're very much like an animal with four back legs, and they're walking forward looking backwards. You're absolutely right. When this all started, the idea was that, in fact, discrimination was the baseline. Humans have lived in the construction of their social relations from the beginning, from at least the start of historical record keeping, probably before that, starting from a fundamental structural baseline of discrimination. The entire point of social solidarity, the entire point of group feeling, as Abdul Rahman ibn Khaldun, a very famous socio-historian from the Arabic part of or the Muslim part of the Mediterranean in the 13th century, 14th century, was fond of saying this. Group feeling, all of these notions were based on the positive value of discrimination. The question was with respect to what characteristics one can discriminate, and the idea was that, in fact, the way you defined a society was by defining that relatively small group of characteristics with respect to which you couldn't discriminate. That's the basis of social solidarity. And because there were relatively few, and the assumption was that you could discriminate with respect to everything else, as lunatic as your discrimination might be. That is, right. And I use lunatic in its ancient sense as irrational, as opposed to as its medical or pejorative sense with respect to the judgment of an individual. But in the sense of its irrationality or arbitrariness, didn't matter, right? The problem now, and you've put your finger on it, is if in fact what we're doing is taking that basic postulate of social organization and turning it on its head, and saying that indeed the way in which you define social solidarity is by the absence of discrimination. This is essentially where where we're walking, although we're looking at it again, we're walking backwards towards it because we all haven't yet had the brains to turn around and look at where they're going. And this is where they're going. If in fact the whole point of social justice is to avoid discrimination, then we're at the other end of the pole, in which what we have are a huge number of characteristics with respect to which discrimination destroys the social fabric. And therefore, what should be defined is those characteristics, conditions, or actions with respect to which discrimination is permitted. And then by definition, every other form of discrimination, that is, of making a decision based on a factor, would be both socially and legally, would be a social taboo and would be legally violating some statute or regulation. And that's sort of where we're getting. And so when you look at the New York statute, this is, for those of you, it's fairly easy to find online. And it's repeated throughout this, but I started with section 8-101 of the Administrative Code of the City of New York, and you'll see it in, there'll be some variations among virtually all jurisdictions. What you wind up having is, we're doing it the old-fashioned, we just keep adding characteristics. We overlay it with the notion of social justice, and at the end of the day, we wind up tripping over each other. Or tripping over all of these things, because you're right, once you have the list of everything, then the question is, what can you discriminate? But we never get there.
And there is no list of everything. You couldn't possibly get a list of everything.
Exactly, which means that if you're going to do this right, and you're committed to social justice, and you're committed to social justice in the way these people think they're committed to social justice, who knows whether they are or not, but that's certainly the rhetoric. And that would be the rhetoric I would assume would be embraced. I would be curious to hear whether, in fact, anyone who is responsible for this would take an opposing position with respect to the meaning of social justice as a function of discrimination, or discrimination as a function of social justice. Then what they really should be doing, because that's where they back themselves into this, what they really should be doing is writing a statute that is very simple, or administrative, rewrite section 8-101 of the Administrative Code of the City of New York to say all discrimination with respect to any factor is prohibited, with the exception of discrimination based on, colon. And now you may have 2 or 3 or 4.
Right.
Well, which ones?
But they already have exceptions. They already listed exceptions.
Right. But those are as applied exception. I'm talking about whole categorical exceptions that we're not going to worry about. And this is of course very, very American. If there's a superior public body that permits discrimination, or that is constitutionally entitled to do that, and they're actually willing to do that, then you've got to bend the knee to a superior political force. And then the others are prevention from performance of their duties, or reasonably necessary for normal operation. And then we have a well-developed jurisprudence in the United States. It's now, 50 years old or so, on the nature, forms, and the practices and discourse of accommodation and its limitations. Right. That's all well understood, and you can do that with respect to every characteristics, and that's what makes this manageable, in the sense that absolutes in the context of making decisions, quote unquote, or factoring characteristics with respect to decision-making discrimination, and its greatest generality of meaning, is softened, and that makes perfect sense. But I don't want to go there. I want to see if we can figure out what we could, if we're looking at it from a social justice perspective, what sorts of discrimination after all of this are still permitted, or encouraged, or permitted. Right. And when you look at the New York statute, you think, well, and this makes so much sense, given, although it's hypocritical, and they would rather die than admit that this is what they're doing, but they'll back into this, which is why you never want to do it this way, although you should. Class. Can you discriminate against the poor? Can you discriminate against the rich? You're not going to discriminate against the rich because they're going to buy their way out of that discrimination for the most part. But can you discriminate against the poor?
Will they ever put that in writing?
Well, but the thing is, if you're moving towards a social justice platform, and right now, if we generalize the New York statute, yeah, you can discriminate against the poor. They would say, we're really not discriminating against the poor. That is the effect of markets. And since we price everything, then too bad. But that's actually not true. And if it is true, then we really have to think about whether the goods that we're pricing should be public goods or not. A great example of that is education. We sort of understood that class discrimination in the provision of education was a gray area, unless, of course, you were wealthy and you want to send your kids to Harvard or Yale or these ridiculously high-priced, I won't say overpriced because I have no idea, I haven't looked at their books, these high-priced institutions where their kids can get into lifetime solidarity groups that then become self-reflective little collectives that will then zoom their way up to prominence.
Okay, Dad.
Right. But, sorry, it's a little bone. There's the immigrant in me going, so much for this principle of equality here. But states have been sensitive to this, and New York in particular, right, by developing public alternatives, some of which became very, very, very prestigious in their own way, right? But that still that ameliorates the problem, but it remains. So is it possible to say that we must discriminate on the basis of class, at least with respect to market goods? If we do, ought we to create an exception to that discrimination based on economic class? We haven't gotten to social class yet, on economic class, by designating certain key objects or access to certain key services to be public goods, and therefore the state would have to subsidize it.
Oh man, that's such a great point. But Republicans would be so pissed off.
It's not just Republicans, it's the Democrats too. They're just really snooty about what it is. I mean, I'll tell you what, never mind. There's an old story about the leading communists on Park Avenue would be more than happy to share their second fur coat. But
come on, why not?
No. But anyway, so you can do that, but that's only half the issue, because in fact, what you're really talking about here is not discriminating on the basis of the class because of markets, but what happens if, in fact, you can discriminate on the basis of economic class in hiring. So I've got this big law firm, and this is the convergence of both economic class and social class. There's some connection between them, although not necessarily, right? So I'm running this big snooty law firm, and I'm going to the industries that produce fodder, that produce labor market inputs for my firm. I need to hire associates, right. Little cogs, and once I weed them out, a few of them will become partners, and that's how the wheel, everyone is happy, right? If in fact I can discriminate on the basis of economic and social class, I can look at someone and not hire them. I can't not hire them because of their race, sex, national origin, height, or weight. But if you're poor folk, I can discriminate against you because I'm going to.
This is terrible. Oh my!
I'm going to subsume this under things like, well, my client won't like you. That used to be, well, I'm African American and I got white clients. My client won't like you because you're African American. We got over that, but we certainly haven't gotten.
No, this bill is like laying it out. Then
it is. It's laying it all out, which is why I found this to be quite interesting. So that this big firm can say, no, I'm sorry, I don't hire poor folk. And I don't hire poor folk because I think that they'll use some mealy-mouthed, multisyllabic excuses that will make it sound better. But really, what they're saying is we don't hire poor folk because y'all can't get along with the kind of snooty rich people who are snooty and rich. In fact, because they want to maintain that social distance, that gap, that identifying marker, so that we can, amongst ourselves, act in a particular way, and in the process discriminate against you because you all don't know the proper way of ordering your folks. These are the the ways, are whether you should drink white wine with meat, or whatever stupid thing there is. And then that converges, right? Economic class then converges with social class. And we see this not on the right. I mean, the right is an easy target. The left, you have to work a little harder. But here we get to my favorite New Yorkers. And I don't mean New York City people, because, of course, their notions of social class make it impossible for them to live in the city. So they're going to go out to the suburbs. The people who are responsible for the proliferation of that delightful discriminatory concept, the deplorables.
Oh.
That ain't coming from the right. The right's got its own problems. They're still in the 19th century in terms of some of them.
I mean, in my opinion, everybody sucks. So
well, no. What it does is the beauty of doing something for a good reason tends to expose your own, the things that you want to hide, which is and that you're blind to, the ways in which you yourself are a perpetrator of this, not with respect to your favorite taboos, right, height and weight in this case, but with respect to the kind of discrimination you are perfectly happy to continue. And in this class, it would be social and economic class. We still, I hate to say this, and please forgive me, right? We use the word deplorables, or is it deplorables, despicables? It doesn't really matter. It's those people who we'd never have to dinner. And therefore, if we're not going to have them over to dinner, we're certainly not going to have them marrying our children, and we're certainly not going to hire them, which means that they're always going to remain deplorables. And we like them that way. From the left perspective, have them go back to NASCAR. From the right perspective, have them go to Harvard. But we're going to have nothing to do with them in either case. So that's one category. Right. So if New York is going to rewrite this, we're going to say, we're New York. We have $100 million penthouses. We can discriminate against, and we have the market, which is, we're going to hide behind the market, even though we're classic rich people socialists who don't like the idea of profits unless it's profits from my own investing. And we don't like the idea of markets and rampant consumerism, unless, of course, it's because I had Adolfo design my solid gold faucets. But that's okay. We can find an exception. So we're going to build in these exceptions. So that's one. So social and economic class, right, is one.
No, there's so many. So
no, there aren't that many. That's the thing.
No. It's just, if you are so narrow with how you are outlining the discriminatory acts, you are opening up a Pandora's box of, well, this is what I can discriminate against, and this is what I can't.
But that's a good thing. But you're viewing this as a bad thing. I'm viewing this as a great thing.
Okay.
Because in fact, and I think it's really good that we have, after 200 years, we are probably one of the few nations on earth that are really having very, very difficult conversation, mostly because we all don't quite know what we're talking about, but our impulses are right. In a sense, we want to transform our society, and and we have to use these little discursive tropes so that we can kind of make sure everyone understands that we're on the same page. And this is the social justice trope. And putting aside things like historical revenge taking and using the master's tool to make yourself into the thing that you despise. Putting that aside, it's a temporary thing. Hopefully it's a temporary thing, or we're back where we started from. Putting all that aside, social justice, which then reinvents society and, all the way back to the start of history from the constitution of a society as a discriminatory machine to the constitution of a society that is a non-discriminatory machine, right? But one that has to preserve social solidarity, which means at some point you are going to have to discriminate. You are going to have to show the markers that show you're in rather than out.
Right.
Then we're left with the question. And at that point, some of the foibles of society really come out. And my big one, right, which is why I've harped and harped and harped on it. My big one is social class, social and economic class.
Right.
I see it all the time in my work. Everything from denying the autonomy of the poor and the quote unquote unsocially educated by calling them victims, and then having a bunch of rich people get together in NGOs to work for them, to educate them, and then to tell them what it is they should feel and how it is that they should blah, 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 and then strip them of their own autonomy. You're not going to want to talk to them. You're going to want to talk at them. There was this moment in the 80s when there was a small group of left academics that actually got this and wrote a little bit about, hey, maybe that's not so cool. But that was like a thing for a little while. And then it just got, I don't know what happened to it. It's sidelined to some extent because everyone is now, whether you're left or right or center, you're all rushing to the regulatory machinery. And that means, what is it? They all love being real politics. That means we have to make compromises and decision, blah, 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 blah. And it's, but anyway, so yeah, so we wind up having to discriminate, and social and economic one is a really big one. Are there others?
You seem to think so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some of it is in the New York, you can't think of any. You don't want to go there. No, age is a no-no.
Obviously it's a no-no, but I think
just ask,
I think that economic and social class is a no-no.
Well, no, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. Now the same people who don't, or who are conflicted, you have to look at Ms. Feinstein. You could have looked at Ronald Reagan, although he's younger. You can look at Mr. Trump, and you can look at Mr. Biden, and you can ask, and they're all whispering, but they love doing this. Oh, the law says that we don't discriminate, but here's how we are going to discriminate.
Okay,
so what we're going to do is
retire. Also,
we're going to become completely hypocritical. So what we're going to do is say, look, we really love the social justice thing, and we'll put our favorites up. But with respect to the other ones, especially the ones that we're a little queasy about, we won't put it into law. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to use social markers, right? We're going to use social norms, right? And so some people think that Mr. Biden is too old, which means that they are age discriminating. Dianne Feinstein is too old, and they'll use euphemisms: capacity, vigor, dementia, but always in whispers. And then they'll do these little whisper campaigns, and then they'll have someone come up and find some doctor or something, because everything is scientific nowadays, and find some scientific basis for saying the man can't run a 5-second mile, so clearly he's incapable of being president. Some kind of ludicrous thing like this. And it may well be true, but right now the law says you can't discriminate against age, and yet we then use our social mechanisms to do just that and say, oh, we're really not discriminating. You know what we're doing? We're guiding. We're advising. We're going back to my favorite thing.
Okay, but that happens for every age group. It
happens for everything. It happens for age groups. It happens for all of these categories. So now, age, you can discriminate. You can't discriminate against age, right? But you can discriminate against social and economic class, right? What else can we discriminate against?
Let's see.
I got one that you can discriminate against in New York's policy. I am a hooker.
Okay, but
let's assume for the moment that hooking is, and it's not me, it's the alternative, the metaverse me.
He actually is, people.
Do not call me.
His
You can't
number is
afford
on
me
all
right now.
bathrooms in New York
Right. Oh
City
my God, yeah, that's right. What
walls.
was it called? Lotus. But anyway, so just assume that person X is a hooker.
Okay.
Let's
Even though
assume
that
that
is
hooking, and let's assume that hooking of the sort that this person does, and again, it's gender neutral.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
uh, Prostitution. I mean, there's some forms of prostitution that are legal because we don't call them prostitution, but there's some forms that are not. So this is the stuff that can get you arrested, right?
Okay.
I am now coming to you and I want to rent an apartment and I want to pay my rent from the proceeds of my hooking. Can I discriminate against you? The answer in New York is yes. Now, what's interesting though is if the cops come and arrest me for hooking, you can't deny me an apartment because I was convicted of hooking, but you can deny me an apartment if I seek to rent it by giving you the proceeds of my hooking.
Interesting. So that's kind of
Because it's lawful sources of income, which are, and that was written not for this kind of thing. It was written for governmental assistance of some
I
kind
understand that.
and the like. But discrimination on the basis of conviction or arrest record is a no-no. You can't discriminate on that basis. But if I discriminate, and let's say I'm not, the hooker was the easy one. Let's say that I am part of the I don't know, some organization that traffics in weapons.
Okay.
And trafficking in weapons is bad, or I am a money launderer, or I am a fence, right? Can you refuse to rent to me if I offer you the proceeds of that? The answer is yes.
You can, but you could also die.
Those are those are social risks, the legal risks. So one of the things I guess that we can discriminate is on the basis of the source of your income. That is, in a sense, what we can discriminate is on the basis of your occupation. But that thing gets tied to economic class as well, right? But on certain kinds of occupations, what kind of occupations? The occupations that effectively have been made illegal, right? So hooking, money laundering, international terrorism. I'm in the business of bribing officials so that for other people, so that legislators will pass whatever laws these other people who will remain nameless, because of course I'm not going to tell you what my client list looks like. That's a no too, right? Is there anyone else that you can discriminate against? I got one.
Man, you got them all. What is this one?
Well, there's only three, right? There's those I've given you two. The third one is on the basis of political views. Can I refuse to hire you because you're a Republican? I can't refuse to hire you because you're a Catholic or Muslim or a Santero. But can I refuse to hire you if you are a member of the Republican Party? Can I refuse to hire you? Oh, and here's a good one. This is legal
What if you're a
discrimination
member
with
of the
respect.
Ku Klux Klan?
That's a good question. I was going to make it, but that's so 19th century. Let's do this 21st century.
Okay.
Because yes, you're absolutely right. That was going to be the question. But let's put it in, that's too easy. Let's make it hard.
What about an incel? What if you're a member of an incel?
There you go. There you go. You're an incel and therefore you're misogynistic, right? You hate women, right? So, and there's nothing in the law that requires you to not be misogynistic,
right?
As long as it doesn't involve, workplace or accommodations. Social relations, you can. But let's say everyone knows you're an incel and everyone has seen your, and this is now the 20th century, you also can't keep your fingers off your keyboard, and you've been typing all kinds of ridiculously tasteless things on social media because you can't help yourself.
Right.
Or as the song goes, girl can help it. Which is funny in the context of insult. So now, I know this. Can I refuse to hire you? The answer, that one's it's actually easier. The answer is yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And we do this already.
Yeah.
Right. So now we know that if in fact, if we wanted to, we can rewrite the New York statute that says all discrimination using any factor is illegal unless what? Unless it involves social or economic class, political views, including views about discrimination, and what was the other one? Oh, sources of income. That is, you're falling in the unregulated, the taboo economy.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. But at this point, of course, everyone is freaking out and they're saying, wait, didn't you miss one? Didn't you miss one? And the last one, of course, would be, but and I would say you're not missing it. You have to be quote unquote qualified for the job, right? You have to have the qualification. So if I'm going to be an associate at a law firm, I need basic qualifications, i.e. I've passed the bar and I've graduated from law school. Question at that point is whether you can use, and this is a current question, I'll end with this, whether you can use qualifications, and we've been litigating this to death, whether you can use qualifications to hide structural discrimination. And we're getting pretty good at least describing that issue, if not really good at ferreting it out. So there we go.
That's a great question. That's a great question, because there are a lot of companies that are trying to figure out how to intertwine DE&I into their hiring processes and use skills for that purpose. But
right. And then they're hypocrites, because then they immediately turn around and go, oh my God, I want to hire Y. So I know what I'll do, because I really don't want to discriminate, but I know in this case what I can do. I can write a request for employment so that the only person on earth that's qualified for this job is Y, because the person I want to hire is Y.
Right.
And that
means that the people above that hiring manager need to be really, really cognizant and on their toes.
But it also shows you the inherent corruption of even a system, the purpose of which is to avoid corruption.
Absolutely.
All right. That's all I got. Woof, woof.
Bark, bark. Oh, we should have switched.
Oh, bark, bark.
Woof, woof. Thanks, everyone. We'll
Until next time.